What happens when your home becomes a stage for reptilian chaos, forcing you to confront the landlord who twisted dreams into nightmares? Are you ready to reclaim your life? The rain was relentless, hammering against the roof, like it had sworn vengeance on my fragile sanctuary. I stood frozen at the top of the basement stairs, the rhythmic echoes of the storm morphing into a haunting melody that seemed to beckon me forward. Each drop that hit the ground was a countdown, a warning bell ringing loudly against the dark abyss that loomed below. The realization hit me like a freight train. My haven, the cozy basement where I had stored dreams and memories, was now overflowing with chaos. As the initial shock began to wear off, a primal scream of rage surged within me. How dare my landlord, without a shred of remorse or responsibility, dismiss every complaint I'd ever made? How could he sleep peacefully while I wrestled with my haunted reality? I was done being the victim. It was time to take back control. Driven by a mix of fear and fury, I descended the stairs, each step weighted by the absurdity of the situation. Air thick with a scent of mildew and the sickening tang of brackish water tugged at my senses. As I squinted through the murky depths, the grotesque shapes beneath the surface twisted and rolled, confirming my worst fears. Rough, jagged snouts were emerging like grotesque masks of betrayal. My heart raced as I stumbled backward, still in disbelief that these predators had infiltrated what was supposed to be a safe space. I thought of the night spent nestled on my couch, blissfully ignorant of the slithering menace lurking just a few feet away. What had I done to deserve this? I fought against the rising tide of resentment. There was no room in my mind for inaction any longer. I needed reinforcements. In that moment of despair, the visceral thirst for justice ignited a fire inside of me. I hurried outside to the relentless rain, grabbing my phone with shaking hands to dial Maya. I trusted her more than anyone, her tenacity matched only by her quirky sense of humor. The phone rang, and I could almost feel our connection vibrating through the chaos of the storm. "Anna, what's going on?" she answered, her voice a lifeline amidst the torrent. I spat out the words in a frenzy, dishing the sordid details of the flood and the nightmare waiting below. Each sentence dripped with outrage, a reflection of my festering frustration. "Maya, there are crocodiles in my basement. We need to do something." An uneasy pause followed, and I imagined her bobbed head shaking slightly, processing the bizarre turn my life had taken. Maya showed up faster than I expected, armed with an assortment of flashlights and that signature purple hair sticking up comically from the wet downpour. "Did you really think I was going to let a bunch of reptiles hold a stakeout in your basement without me?" she joked, although we both understood that this wasn't just a wild reptilian party. This was about our safety and the utter negligence that had led to this absurd situation. Together we stared into the sloshing water, our mutual disdain for dream-crushing landlords boiling over. The tension clung to the air like the humidity around us, thick, suffocating, demanding a reckoning. I could feel every ounce of rage inside me crystallizing into a singular purpose: to confront Victor Steele, the slick real estate agent who had so callously turned a blind eye to the deterioration of my home. Fueled by a determination to expose the ridiculousness of the entire situation, we trekked through the storm to Victor's office, the rain merging into a torrent that matched our collective fury. "This is outrageous, Anna. Crocodiles in your basement? That's a lawsuit waiting to happen," Maya exclaimed, her voice laced with incredulity. As we pushed open the door to his office, the very air shifted, like stepping into a predator's lair. Victor sat casually behind his desk, exuding that disarming charm that had lured me into believing I was safe renting from him. "Anna, always a pleasure," he smirked. But his eyes danced with a darker glee. I could smell the malice beneath the polished veneer. Without hesitation, I laid it all out. The details of the flood, the danger, the unwavering negligence from someone who was supposed to care. The intensity of my outrage cut through the room, a raw force that neither Victor's charm nor the slick ties could mask. He laughed, a hollow, chilling sound that echoed off the walls and sent a chill racing down my spine. "Crocodiles? Really? And here I thought ambience was something you wanted to enhance your property value." My heart surged, pounding furiously against a wall of shock and disbelief. I could feel the fire reigniting inside me, I wasn't going to let him brush this off. "This isn't a joke, Victor. You've ignored my complaints time and again, and now it's come to this? It's time for accountability." The confrontation was electric, the air charged with the electricity of pent-up fury that demanded to be unleashed. I could see a flicker of concern in his eyes. Was it the red flags being raised around him? Or was it the unyielding truth that I had finally found my voice? My resolve hardened with each word. I grasped the support of Maya's presence firmly beside me. Our bond and the clarity of our mission sharpened purpose into action. "We're taking this public," I continued, my voice low but steady. "You will be held accountable for this negligence. I won't be your victim any longer." The taste of triumph clung to the tip of my tongue, sweet with anticipation. I knew we had embarked on a battle, one fueled by injustice and cloaked in the absurdity of a landlord who had mishandled so much. The reptiles would not be the only ones forced to leave the murky depths. The time for reckoning had finally arrived. What kind of world was this, where homes could be turned into stockyards for reptiles, under the watchful neglect of someone like him? Soon the truth would be unveiled, and I was ready to scream it from the rooftops. The tension in Victor's office clawed at my insides as I faced a man who, until moments ago, had represented a world of safety and security I thought I could trust. With Maya's fierce determination radiating beside me, I felt emboldened, ready to shatter the fragile facade he had built around his hollow charm. "Your negligence has put my life, and the lives of my neighbors, at risk." A basement flooded and filled with crocodiles isn't just a quirky anecdote. It's a failing of your duty as a landlord. I pressed every word, driven by not only my mounting fury, but an almost primal need for justice. Victor's nonchalance was non-committal. It seemed to bounce off my words like bullets off armor, but I noticed the flicker of anxiety beneath his smooth exterior. Perhaps I had finally pricked the balloon of his arrogance. As his laughter faded into uneasy silence, my voice grew stronger, fueled by the weight of every wrong he'd committed against tenants who had felt too small to challenge him. "You think this is a laughing matter? Imagine if those creatures had found their way into someone else's home. You'd rather gloss over this with a joke than confront the reality. The truth is, it's a catastrophe waiting to happen." I could hear the beat of anger in my own chest, each thud a reminder of the readiness I carried deep inside to fight for what was mine, the sanctity of my home, the right not to live in fear, and the fragile dreams that had flooded with the dirty waters in my basement. Maya stepped forward, her vivid hair striking a contradiction against the oppressive atmosphere of the room. "This isn't just about Anna. We're the voices of everyone else you've neglected. How long until someone sues you for something worse, like an injury or worse?" She was fierce, fiery even, and her words peppered Victor's confidence with growing doubt. The veil of his charm began to fray around the edges. "You're playing with fire, Steele. The clock is ticking, and if we have to go to the media, to the authorities, believe me when I say we will take this vile situation serious." She pressed on, her voice sharper than the unyielding edges of the truth that cut through the room. Victor sighed, his composed demeanor cracking ever so slightly. "You ladies have quite the imaginations," he scoffed, attempting to steer the conversation back to lighter shores. Yet beneath the bravado, I saw the fear that flickered in his eyes, the realization that he was losing control of the narrative. With each word I had spoken, we had taken steps forward on the tightrope of accountability, warning him that he could no longer hide behind his charming facade. "You think this is over?" I countered, my voice low and laced with a determined heat. "According to the law, you owe me repairs, a full investigation, not to mention the structural integrity of your property under safe conditions. This is your last chance. Rectify everything or face the consequences." The air hung thick and electric, a tension that demanded resolution. Just as I thought we had driven home our point, he leaned back in his chair, smugness trying to reclaim its throne despite the uncertainty that cracked through his polished image. "What's to prevent you from turning this into a spectacle? It would ruin my reputation." "You don't want to open up that can of worms," he warned, the facade momentarily broken. But the words barely registered. They were too late for threats. I had seen enough to know that he had preferred the status quo over the safety of his renters. "I have never wanted to be a person who sits quietly while my life is endangered. Do not coerce me into submission ever again." My voice resonated, each syllable a pledge to myself, a vow not to retreat from the overwhelming chasm that our confrontation was threatening to plunge into. "Let's be realistic," Maya added, a fire in her eyes that mirrored my own. "We're not your punching bags, Victor. We're shining a light on your malpractice, your gross disregard for human safety and well-being. If you're smart, you'll realize it's better to negotiate and take the necessary steps to correct this before it spirals out of your control." I watched as the reality of our resolve crashed into his carefully constructed strategy. He wasn't just up against me anymore, but a coalition of angry tenants holding him accountable for an indefensible situation. We had pulled the curtain back on a landlord who thought he could profit from negligence. It was delightful to see the morsels of doubt creeping into his calculated demeanor. As I stood there, rage still simmering in my belly, a rush of elation overcame me, the energy in the room pulsating like the floodwaters that had invaded my home. "So we'll see how you respond, Victor. Place your cards on the table. This is our moment to finally reshape the foundation of our living conditions. We're not backing down. The story ends here." With those words, I felt something shift. I wouldn't let my fears dictate my reality any longer. The moment had come for me to reclaim my space, uproot the deceitful shrubs of negligence and injustice that had taken root, and make sure that the remnants of my home could bask in the safety it practically begged for. What was next awaited us both. The moment hung in the air, electrified and suspended between us, as Victor wrestled with the consequences of his negligence. The flicker of disdain had long since faded from his eyes, replaced now by the stark reality of his powerlessness against the two of us armed with righteous fury. "You think this is some game?" I spat, the weight of years of pent-up frustration and disappointment erupting from within me. Most people would have left this up to the authorities, but here we are, two women willing to stand at the front line, confronting the truth head-on. It was as if the air crackled with a charged intensity, drawing in every ounce of stigma and shame lurking beneath Victor's polished veneer. I was relentless, virtually radiating with anger, channeling it into energy that called for justice. His perfumed confidence had been stripped away, leaving behind a man who suddenly seemed vulnerable and exposed. Maya stepped beside me, her vibrant hair a stark contrast against the monochrome backdrop of a room steeped in conflict. Her fists were clenched, a warrior ready for battle, and I could see her determination mirrored in my own. "Let's not forget," she interjected, her voice unwavering and direct. "We have options. Legal options. And I believe we could gather more tenants, build a coalition against your negligence. We will bring this to light even if it requires going to the media." There was something liberating in her words, the possibility that we might not just fight our own battles, but ignite a movement that could ignite change for all the other tenants whose voices had been stifled by Victor's arrogance. I felt a thrilling rush of defiance wash over me. The idea of standing alongside my neighbors, sharing their stories, their nightmares of living under Victor's reign, filled me with a bold longing for justice that had eluded us for too long. Victor's expression shifted once more, his slick facade cracking like a porcelain mask under pressure. The arrogance that had adorned him began to peel back, layer by layer. "You think you can rally the others? Nobody cares about a couple of crocodiles. They're probably just as imaginary as the risks you're trying to conjure." He scoffed, desperate to cling onto something solid as the tide turned against him. The dismissal rang out hollowly, a feeble echo of authority desperately grasping at straws. I could hardly contain my laughter at his sheer audacity, his feigned indifference exposing the panic that simmered beneath. Did he truly believe he could trivialize the threat he had blithely ignored? "Those reptiles in my basement are only the beginning, Victor," I retorted fiercely. "The consequences of your cowardice breed far worse creatures, lurking in shadows of litigation and reputational ruin. But if you're too blinded by your entitlement to see that, then so be it." The air between us thickened with tension, the gentlemanly charm in his voice turning into a sharp, frayed whisper. "You underestimate me," he replied, the bravado of a man approaching the edge of losing everything. "If you think this is going to end well for you, you're in for a rude awakening." For a brief instant, I felt the icy tendrils of despair creep in, reminding me of how powerless one could feel against someone wielding systemic authority. Yet rage fueled my resolve, and I swiftly dismissed the chilling fear that threatened to engulf me. Awakening? Oh, I am already wide awake. I shot back, determined to stand my ground. You're just prolonging the inevitable, and I welcome every step of this journey you're trying to navigate with your false bravado. The end game is justice. Truth will always rise above arrogance, and I will never allow you to silence us. As our voices clashed, a sudden clarity washed over me, the realization that I was not merely vying for a personal victory, but preparing to embark on a quest for accountability that transcended my own fears. What you don't realize, Victor, is that we don't fight alone, I declared, my voice unwavering in its passion. You are no longer an isolated tyrant, but a glaring example of everything that is wrong in tenant-landlord relations. Witness our strength, as individuals choosing to unite against your indifference. Each unjust action becomes fuel for the movement we will ignite. Your foundation is crumbling under our will, not the whims that have long protected your negligence. The newfound intensity coursing through me felt almost prophetic, a battle cry that echoed through the neglected walls of the office, as if rallying unseen forces. Victor's composure had turned into desperation, his hands anxiously fidgeting beneath the desk, betraying the calm demeanor he desperately tried to maintain. All this talk of unity and exposure is commendable, but let's be realistic, he began, attempting to regain the upper hand as my heart raced in anticipation of his next move. Do you think the world really cares? Each syllable dripped with disdain, an attempt to belittle the wildfire of empowerment brewing within us. But Maya, fierce and unyielding, leaped in again. You underestimate the resilience of people fighting for their homes. The tide is shifting, Victor. Our fight to reclaim our dignity isn't something you can contain. That's the reality you've buried under your false sense of security. The weight of her convictions smashed through the air like a lightning strike, painting the room in a hue of raw determination and resolve. In that moment, I felt an exhilaration that lifted me beyond fear and trepidation, an energy ignited by our collective defiance. Speak for yourself, I countered, heart-thundering, emboldened by the strength radiating from Maya. It's not merely about what happens here today. It's about every tenant feeling voiceless because of your contempt for safety. You've underestimated us far too long, and today will mark your awakening as well. The assurance in my voice cut through the stagnant air like a knife, resonating with the unwavering truth of our struggle. The storm outside screamed like a battle cry, punctuating the vulnerabilities we would expose, relishing in the thought of bringing light to a world cloaked in shadows. We stood united, the flickering embers of change before us, as I could almost visualize our journey unfolding, a labyrinthine path filled with adversities, yet laced with triumph. There was an undeniable thrill coursing through my veins as I inhaled deeply, reminding myself that in this chaotic moment lay our chance for change, a showdown that demanded we usher the truth into the light. The basement scandal had evolved into something extraordinary, unraveling a tale that transcended beyond mere crocodiles lurking in murky waters. With confidence crackling between us like sparks, I realized that bearing witness to our fight was only the beginning. What awaited us beyond this confrontation? A battle worth forging onward. As I stood there, the air thick with a mix of confrontation and anticipation, I felt the world outside begin to reflect the tempest brewing within that cramped office. Heavy rain lashed against the window as if nature itself were clamoring for justice, demanding Victor's facade crumble under its relentless assault. Maya's fierce presence beside me fortified my spirit. Our confrontation, outlandish as it seemed, ignited a flare of righteousness that surged through the very marrow of my bones. I was no longer merely a voice in the night. I was the storm, ready to sweep through the complacency Victor represented, shattering it into oblivion. This was our moment, and nothing could deter the promise of change that lingered just beyond the horizon. Victor, rattled yet still grasping for control, leaned back against his chair, the shine of his suit dulled by the weight of his own hubris. Rallying a bunch of disgruntled tenants doesn't amount to anything in the grand scheme, Anna, he scoffed, trying desperately to maintain an air of superiority. But beneath his bravado, I saw it. The flicker of doubt in his eyes, the tremor in his fingers as they danced over the desk. I had exposed a raw nerve, and I wasn't going to let him escape the grip of accountability with mere words. Your arrogance blinds you to just how powerful collective anger can be. It's not a matter of grand schemes. It's about the reckoning you'll face for the negligence that has now revealed itself as a deliberate affront to humanity. Those crocodiles are manifestations of your disregard, and trust me, they won't be the most dangerous creatures that emerge from this fiasco. Eager anticipation electrified our exchange as Maya nodded, her presence a steady anchor to the storm I summoned. Fueled by the urgency of the moment, I quickened the pace of our dialogue, feeling the energy shift ever so slightly with each word. Think of all the other tenants you've silenced with your indifference, I pressed, not bothering to disguise the ferocity in my voice. How many others have suffered while you prioritize profit over safety? The photos I've shared online show not only the flooding in my basement, but the sheer disregard echoing throughout our community. Perhaps the world doesn't care in your eyes, but we are going to ensure they do. The question lingering in the air seemed a catalyst, tightening the tension like a coiled spring beneath our feet. I could almost feel the minds of other tenants aligning with our cause, envisioning the raw power of unity swelling beyond our immediate fight, carving a path toward systemic change and accountability. Suddenly, the reality hit me like a gut punch. This wasn't merely about me, about my submerged basement, or the absurdity of crocodiles living beneath my feet. It was the battle cry for countless individuals, each bearing scars from negligence hidden beneath the polished surfaces of glistening contracts and slick real estate agents. Now you see the foundation of your arrogance, Victor, I rasped, relishing the moment when that veil of control slipped further away. This is about bringing into the light the injustices that your slick words have concealed for far too long. And though you think your dismissals seal our fates, I assure you, the strength of our voices will only amplify the truth until it echoes through the very structure you've built on discord and neglect. The room pulsed with an electric fervor. It was as if the walls bore witness to our determination, the dark undertones becoming a melody of defiance. Victor's laugh became a scattered mockery amid a steady downpour outside that continued to lash violently against the building, seemingly in harmony with my tumultuous spirit. You honestly think you can expose me? You're just one tenant amongst thousands. Do you really believe I'll be worried about a handful of social media posts? He chuckled, trying to smother the fire igniting between us. Yet, I could see through his bravado, the way he was desperately pushing back against the inevitable tide of justice. You mistake the power of community for mere numbers, Victor. Your days of hypocrisy are numbered. We are ready to escalate this if necessary. A handful? No. We will show you an army bound by shared experience and determination, and the end of your reign begins when we stand together. My heart raced at the thought, powered by the unmistakable patience of justice waiting in the dark for its moment to strike. Maya's voice surged alongside mine, raw and unwavering. We will share our truths like wildfire, igniting the spark across this city and beyond. If it takes every ounce of our determination to shine a light upon this negligence, then so be it. Every voice silenced matters, Victor. Every story untold loses luminescence until we unite as one radiant force shaking the very core of your twisted empire. Each word echoed life into our campaign, echoing hope into the hearts of those who had been cowed. Despite the cramped quarters, I envisioned our growing network, an expansive web spinning out from my flooded basement, encircling our colleagues across the apartment complex who had silently endured Victor's negligence. I suggest you take our words seriously, Victor, I warned, channeling every ounce of resolve into my stance. We will expose your fallacies. This time, the crocodiles will swim in a sea of accountability, and the wider community will witness this charade you've played. Our voices are unyielding, and together we will scare off the shadows. The rain intensified, cascading against the windows in a rhythmic roar, and for a moment, I savored the rising tempest echoing our turmoil. There was an unrelenting strength in our unity that couldn't be stifled. With every heartbeat, the pulse of our movement beat louder, heralding justice on the horizon, and the inescapable truth reverberated against the chaos around us. Had the battle just begun? As my passion surged, I could feel the fire within intensify, fueling words that came from a place deeper than mere frustration. The inhalation of shared struggle filled my lungs. I was no longer merely Anna Thompson. a frustrated tenant with a basement full of crocodiles. I had transformed into a beacon of rebellion, a voice for the silenced, echoing through the cavernous chamber. Each tenant behind me infused my resolve with purpose, their faces reflecting the indignation that had for too long simmered under the facade of civility. We were done with being patronized and dismissed by the likes of Victor Steele, who masqueraded as the charming architect of our despair while profiting from our decay. Cracks were beginning to form, not just in his veneer, but also in the complacency of an unyielding system that had failed us all. Maya's presence was uplifting, akin to a comet streaking across a dark sky, illuminating pathways I hadn't dared to envision before. With every word of defiance we uttered together, I caught glimpses of fellow tenants, a patchwork of resilience and bravery woven into our collective voice. "You think it's just crocodiles, Victor," I declared, doubling down into his disbelief. "Let's talk about the mold creeping through the walls, the electrical hazards you ignored, the children in this complex suffering because of the strip-mined regard for safety in pursuit of profit. The swamp beneath our floors is only a symptom of a deeper, festering rot in our community, propagated by your negligence." My voice crescendoed with indignity, the very walls seeming to tremble with the weight of our shared narrative, a saga of betrayal that demanded justice. Victor, visibly rattled now, gripped the edge of his desk tightly, his meticulously coiffed hair slightly askew, betraying the facade he'd so carefully crafted. "This community doesn't matter to me. You're nothing but a calculated nuisance in my grand design," he spat, his arrogance gasping for breath against the tide we were creating. But with every venomous word he flung at us, instead of dampening our resolve, he ignited a coiling tempest of anger yearning to break free. The belief that we were insignificant only reinforced our unity. The more he underestimated us, the stronger we became. It was as if the energy in the room swirled like a cyclone, urging us onward. With all eyes locked on Victor, I seized the moment. A nuisance? Or perhaps you're simply afraid? Afraid of the whispers that rock your empire, cracking the polish of your deceitful charm. You know as well as I do that the stories from this basement, of faulty plumbing and errant reptiles, aren't isolated incidences. Families suffer daily under your watchful neglect. We are not just tenants, we're the beating heart of this community. And we'll be damned if we allow you to suffocate us in your self-serving ambitions. My words poured out like a torrential storm slamming against his precarious facade, desperation and bravado mixing in a volatile cocktail of deserved confrontation. Maya stepped up beside me, the energy in the room shifting with her fierce momentum. "You've been able to dismiss us for too long, Victor." Her voice cut through the din with surgical precision. "You think we'll just roll over and allow you to continue this charade? You regard our community like mere cash cows, squeezing out profits without concern for our safety. You may have silenced voices before, but now, look at the crowd behind us. This isn't just about you and your negligence. It's a resounding wake-up call for the entire city." The raw authenticity simmered through her words, imbued with a steadfast conviction that could electrify the air in the stuffy room. I didn't know whether it was the mixture of anger and adrenaline surging through me, or the palpable anticipation radiating off Maya's steadfast presence, but I felt invincible, a force of nature rising from the depths of my submerged nightmare. In that moment, I grasped the fundamental truth. Our shared plight transcended my personal battle. It heralded the potential for collective uprising against a pernicious system. Take this as a warning, Victor Steele. Judgments of indifference are no longer acceptable. Each story we tell will pull down another layer of your deceit. We will become more than a nuisance. We will bring your negligence to its knees, arm in arm, behind the damning spotlight of truth. The thunderous applause from our gathered allies resonated, drowning out Victor's feeble attempts to rein us back in. The tension thickened in the room. It was as palpable as the rain streaking down the windows. Doubt flickered beneath Victor's hardened exterior as he reeled in the faces surrounding him. Those once muted tenants now emboldened and defiant. Our rallying cries for justice powered a storm that raged not only against us but toward this archaic bureaucracy standing in our way. The promise of investigation had become more than a fleeting promise. It was a point of no return. With every echo of our united fury, I sensed the walls of complacency beginning to tremble. "You will hear our stories, Victor. You will face the throes of accountability. We will claw our way out from the underbelly of your negligence, and together we'll emerge victorious. I could practically taste the impending change, a palpable energy that both frightened and exhilarated me. The thought of what lay ahead was a thrilling uncertainty, but I knew one thing without a doubt. This was just the beginning. The tenacity of our people could no longer be hidden beneath the weight of Victor's arrogance. Our voices would rally, strong and unwavering, buoyed by the tide of community mingling with the fury of relentless rain. Our opponents might underestimate us today, but soon the very foundation they stood on would tremble, awaiting the justice this storm promised. And as we stood there, an army of voices rising against an empire of indifference, I wondered what colossal truths awaited us just on the horizon. As the applause thundered in my ears, I noticed the shift in Victor's expression, a mask of disbelief beginning to crumble beneath the collective weight of our fury. His pivoting confidence fluttered like a candle flame flickering against a breath of wild wind. The scattered papers on his desk, a mere semblance of control, seemed suddenly unsteady, as if they too recognized the storm brewing within this room. It struck me then how he had underestimated us. Could he really think that by avoiding our concerns, we would wilt quietly? The blissful confidence that once adorned his demeanor had morphed into a hard-edged irritation. This was not just about his short-sightedness. We were confronting a negligence that strangled our very lives, and it was becoming perfectly clear that the Emperor had no clothes. Maya whispered to me amidst the electrified atmosphere, "Can you feel it, Anna? This is our moment, and it's only going to grow more intense." I nodded, though my heart raced with a churn of fear and exhilaration. With every word exchanged, every shaky moment of hesitation from Victor, the fragile bonds of apathy that had long tethered our community began to snap. The constituents of our struggle melted into one, unfettered by guilt, seasoned by indignation, heavy with righteous fury. As I glanced at Maya, her purple hair framing her face like a banner of rebellion, I felt renewed. We were not simply fighting for a diminished basement devoid of crocodiles. We were squeezing oxygen from the very hands that had tried to asphyxiate us. This idea, this fight, was an awakening, a symphony of voices, composed of every heart and soul that had dared to endure. Victor, realizing he was losing ground, straightened his tie with a forced smile, though it bore no warmth. "You should tread lightly, Anna. It may look like you're in control now, but the law is designed to protect those in power, and you're merely a group of unsophisticated tenants rallying against a structure designed to support growth." Oh, how his words incensed me. The fabric of our plight demanded a response, one that would reverberate through his arrogance. "You mistake unity for unsophistication, Victor. We're not here to be condescended to. Our lives are not a transactional error on your ledger. No longer will we be victimized by a philosophy that sees us as mere stepping stones for your ascent. We're planning for a future that rises on principles of safety and community, not your flimsy empire." I could feel the warmth of solidarity radiating around me, drawing strength from the collective of our tribulations. Faces I had seen countless times in passing were now transformed, imbued with an undeniable tenacity. Frank, the elderly man from the third floor, who once never raised his voice, intricately joined the symphony of our resolve. "We've all lived here too long as silent witnesses to negligence," then shrugged, as though it wasn't our problem. "But now we carry each other's burdens, and we're done allowing outside forces to dictate our worth." Every proclamation, each burst of vehemence, turned the room into a wildfire of burgeoning resistance. No one could extinguish our fire, not even the pompous Victor Steele. As the tide of confrontation swelled, the echoing truths bringing life to our grievances, Victor's facade morphed, projecting an uncertain leader, attempting to quell an uprising. "You're all misunderstanding the complexity of property management. I don't have the ability to patch every leaky pipe or handle the nuances of wildlife in the basement with a snap of my fingers. You're asking too much." The audacity clung to his words like mildew. They reeked of excuses laced with disdain, desperately attempting to disguise his utter failure. "Complexity? Don't conflate your greed with complexity, Victor." I shot back, my voice slicing through his excuses. "Take responsibility for the choices you've made. We don't want rehearsed statements from a boardroom. We want genuine accountability." Maya leaned into the collective intensity. "And we've come prepared to make sure you understand that accountability isn't optional. You see," she continued, gesturing dramatically to our gathered support, "this isn't just about crocodiles lurking in the depths of our basements. It's about the neglect that spills over into every other corner of this community, invading our homes, where our children should feel safe." Each articulated thought manifested a deeper connection, not only to our concerns, but molded a thriving identity that resided together in shared outrage. I could almost hear the rain pooling against the concrete outside, a persistence echoing the burdens we seek to shed. Together, we manifested this relentless drive that would not be snubbed into submission. In that charged moment, time felt suspended. A concocted resolve was brewing. The air thickened with our shared anger and hope, a potent mixture that began to pulse through the room. The tension crystallized into a raw anticipation of victory that I could taste upon my lips. "What's stopping us, Anna?" Maya turned and exclaimed, her voice now imbued with fierce conviction. Did she mean that? Did she want to escalate this confrontation? The electricity coursing through my veins urged me forward, as spontaneous whispers of rebellion nestled in my thoughts. "It stops here, Victor. Like an uprooted tree in the district, we shall lay bare the broken roots of your negligence. We've seen what comes from silence, and now we demand a full inspection, a panoply of eyes upon our plight. We will excavate the truths until your empire crumbles." With every word, I felt a collective metamorphosis. We had transformed from a group standing in timid corners into a formidable force, one that insisted on justice, one that refused to be ignored. As Victor's defenses cracked, I found fierce determination swelling within me, mirrored by every expression around the room. We were more than just victims. The path to victory unfolded before us like a vibrant tapestry, woven with threads of courage and fury. And Victor, consider this your notification. A reckoning approaches. I concluded, the fervor boiling within me, making my breath quicken, while the applause and spirited murmurs surged beneath our feet. Armed with the truth and the conviction to fight back, what rugged terrain would we conquer next before this storm gathered momentum? The murmurs of agreement, a chorus driven by defiance, ricocheted through the chamber like arrows shot straight into Victor's heart of complacency. Every face, once marked by defeat and resignation, now shone with the light of resilience, determination igniting like an inferno as we channeled the raw power of the crowd surrounding me. It was as if the dam of our collective spirit had burst open. The anger that had once caged us was now a galvanizing force emboldening our resolve. I let the momentum take hold of me, my heart not merely beating but roaring with adrenaline as I locked eyes with each supporter, feeling the powerful surge of unity amongst us. We were not merely a random collection of tenants voicing our fears and grievances. We were an unstoppable wave crashing against the facade of bureaucracy and negligence that Victor embodied and perpetuated. Victor's posture shifted, revealing a flicker of vulnerability. His earlier bravado, a well-practiced charade, began to wane, leaving behind the bare skeleton of a man who hadn't prepared for this level of opposition. I took note of his twitching fingers as they drummed nervously on the polished desk, spines of anxiety rippling visibly across his otherwise stoic facade. It was a fleeting victory, but it filled me with a sense of vindication. The righteous fury coursing through each of us threatened to boil over like a pot left unattended on the stove. "See, Victor?" I taunted, relishing the moment of his unease. "This isn't just about crocodiles hiding in flooded basements. It's about people compelled to live in fear because of your abject negligence." I witnessed the flickering flames of indignation on his face. He had become a cagey animal, desperate and cornered. Maya's voice reverberated as she animatedly rallied the crowd with every emotional appeal. Her short bob bobbed energetically, an explosive splash of purple in a sea of grays and blues, drawing the attention of everyone present. "We can no longer afford to stay quiet, friends," she declared. "We must elevate our voices until they become a symphony of change. If our demands for safety bring us together, then we've already forged a bond stronger than any contract forged in Victor's sterile boardroom." Her words struck hard against the sterile air of the council meeting, like a splash of color against an unforgiving canvas. I caught sight of several heads nodding, faces transforming from uncertainty into fierce determination. This was no longer merely a gathering of tenants, assembly of whispers, but a burgeoning rebellion demanding to be heard. As Maya continued, my gaze drifted to Victor, his expressions ever-changing, like a marionette caught between strings, one tremulous hand grappling for control, while the other desperately clung to a fading sense of authority. He seemed to comprehend that the very foundation of his influence was crumbling. Maya's speech unfurled a strategic tapestry, effortlessly turning facts and figures into powerful oratory art that compelled the crowd's emotional investment. It wasn't simply numbers anymore. It was our lives, raw and intertwined. This was our collective struggle, one that transcended our individual homes, uniting us all under the banner of justice. Every heartstring pulled reverberated through the crowd, weaving invisible ties that ignited a force capable of dismantling every brick he believed, fortified him in his lofty sanctuary of privilege. Just then, an unexpected voice emerged from the periphery. Frank, the elderly man I only occasionally exchanged pleasantries with, seeing his fragility juxtaposed with the potency in his voice, was startling. He hadn't just found his voice, but had uncovered long-buried memories of a time when he too had seen injustices around him and shied away from confronting them. "I've lived here for over 30 years, Frank began, a fierce intensity rising as his weathered face amplified his every word. "I have seen families, those I grew to care for, crumble under the burden of neglect and fear. No more will we turn a blind eye and become complicit in allowing our lives to be belittled. The foundations of what made this community whole are at risk." His declaration reverberated through me, a potent reminder of the ties that inseparably bound us to one another, emboldening our mission from surrendering to strength. As he spoke, we all collectively shared in the memories, laughter echoing through hallways, kids playing on the stairs, warmth behind every door that once represented a home. Frank, along with every passionate word from Maya and the crescendo of support around me, beckoned forth an uncomfortable reality. This fight was profoundly personal. My heart swelled as I looked around at the faces that had witnessed the neglect together, a kaleidoscope of shared histories weaving into a beautiful tapestry of broader community resilience. This was not just about our homes. This was about reclaiming our right to dignity and safety in a place that had become synonymous with both terror and malice. We were no longer invisible. We had emerged as a lighthouse, cutting through the darkness of the storm that threatened to swallow us whole. The moment hung suspended in the air, a pregnant pause teeming with anticipation, as Victor straightened his suit, infusing his voice with an air of brash defiance. "You think this is over? You think your outbursts will sway anything? The system is built around sustaining the powerful," he spat, but I could see the tremors under his cool facade. His voice lacked its usual charm, revealing a crack that exposed the fear he now felt. Our anger, a cyclone, encircled him, threatening to tear away every defense he clung to. "That's exactly the point," I retorted, energized by the clandestine power coursing among us, the fervor of truth fueling my conviction. "If the system has failed us, then we'll become the architects of our salvation and overhaul this decrepit structure you defend. We refuse to let negligence shelter itself amidst our homes." Fueled by this revelation, buoyed by the support that thrummed beneath me, I rallied the assembly of dissenters into a thunderous applause. Together, we sparked a wildfire that no amount of bureaucratic red tape could snuff out. The laughter of a community reclaimed rose above the cacophony of apathy. This was our moment, and there would be no retreat. When we filed out of that hearing, let it be a vibrant tapestry of demand, an indelible statement, as we transitioned from whispered complaints to fierce advocates for change, until every crocodile that dared roam the depths of our basements was not just evicted, but met with the reckoning it so desperately deserved. How could we ever go back to silence? We had voices, and now we had momentum, ready to carve a future where injustice could no longer hide behind the shadows.